You have grown tremendously as a founder over the past few years. And, you know, for the context is that, we came together because you had this crazy hashtag, crazy idea, making the world a better place for cord blood banking and so on and so forth. And I have been privileged to be an angel and early supporter. And yet, I think you've obviously surpassed me on so many dimensions in terms of learning. So excited to have you to the show. Kathryn, could you share a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me. I'm the founder of Anja Health. We help pregnant parents keep stem cells from their umbilical cords, so essentially can help protect their child's future and use those stem cells for future disease treatment purposes. So I founded it in honor of my brother. He had cerebral palsy and needed cord blood stem cells, and it was that's basically the crux of what I do, and I'm based in LA.
Amazing. And how did you first, come across this issue? I mean, obviously, this is something that you cared about it from a family perspective. Could you share a little bit more about that journey?
Yeah, so when I was 3 and my brother was 1, he was in a near drowning accident that gave him cerebral palsy. He was completely healthy, but then suddenly couldn't walk or talk. And so my family was looking into treatments for his cerebral palsy and found that cord blood stem cells was the most promising opportunity to be able to treat cerebral palsy, mainly because children who are able to receive their own cord blood back into their body generally see motor and social skill improvements. So it's not a complete cure, but definitely really promising. And so we were hoping to find a similar option for my brother, but we couldn't find one because it's pretty difficult to find the match, as I mentioned, if you're a person of color or mixed race, especially. And I've just always sort of a part of like social justice discourse and human rights being a part of, a discussion. I think like this issue in particular spoke to me because it's not only something that could help impact a child's future and health, but it's also bringing more equality to healthcare options and accessibility.
That makes sense. And yet you also chose to, become a creator and eventually a founder to do that, right? And
Mhm.
I think there are so many people who obviously are adjacent to that, right? So people choose to buy cord blood banking, other people choose to volunteer, or maybe even be working as an employee in this space, but you chose to be a creator and a founder. So could you share a little bit more about how that transition happened?
Yeah, well, so was working as a product designer as my first job out of college. And then my brother suddenly passed away. And so that was really what motivated me to do something that would have been able to help him. And I feel like my strengths lie in social media. So I turned to social media first as a means of being able to create this business because I knew I wanted it to be in this space and really be able to speak to pregnant parents in this way about my story and things of that nature. So for me, my first inclination was to turn to social media as a tool to do that. So I started producing TikToks and creating a bunch of content around not only my story, but also just pregnancy in general, talking about different issues that pregnant parents can potentially. Also, more healthcare and accessibility related issues. So things like Roe v. Wade content on. So I had now 150,000 followers on TikTok. So that was sort of my first step journey. So it was always with the intention of being a creator, that a creator acting for the service of being a founder in a sense. And so I would say I'm a founder first and a creator second. But yeah, that was sort of my first method of being able to determine demand and response to the product. And I set up the supply chain and started launching immediately.
So, a little bit of chicken and egg there, right? Which is that, you were a creator and a founder. Which came first, because, obviously, putting yourself out there, right, as a creator, putting yourself out there as someone who's passionate about a topic, it takes something, right? So, could you
Mhm.
share maybe in that first I don't know, month of choosing to start that journey of sharing, how did you feel? Were you feeling like it was more about building to something, or was it feel like more like you wanted to raise top awareness about a topic?
Yeah, I really wanted to raise awareness, but I also wanted to get a sense of how people were responding to it and talking about it themselves. So I think reading the comments for me is really insightful. Initially started just talking about the concept of cord blood banking, in addition to pregnancy. And then I started talking about my personal story in relation to cord blood banking and pregnancy, like the business and cord blood banking and our product and what we offer. And now that's sort of like the main part of my content. Um, so, sorry, I forgot the original question.
Well, I mean, it's more like I think you kind of answered that, right? Which is that
Yeah.
you did actually have that longer playbook in head,
Oh,
in terms
right.
of
Yeah.
exploring the space as you started out.
Yeah,
And
the
what
chicken
was
and
it
egg
about that
issue.
initial reaction that you got from folks? Obviously it was a positive since you kept going, but what was that initial signal that you felt like, okay, this is something I should keep doing versus this is an experiment that doesn't really work out? Yeah.
Yeah. There was never so much a sense of like, oh, should I do this? And content is a litmus test for that. It was always, I'm going to content is how I determine how I'm going to do it. And so, like, I always knew that I would pursue this business and was always working on the sort of business side of things, even as I was making content. But it was just finding what messaging in particular resonated. And so it was sort of like channel market fit as opposed. So, yeah, I was just testing different and really understanding what resonates. And I think the comments in particular that were insightful were things along the lines of like, "You finally make me," or just like emotions that I was able to evoke in viewers. And if they voice that back to me or like reflect my own rhetoric back to me. So like if I talk about like there's little things that I've said in the past, like that you have like sparkles as opposed to like you should view yourself as a unicorn if you're pregnant because you're magical and you have something really cool sticking out of you similar to a unicorn. So things like that, then people will reflect the language back to me. And especially products, people were like saying things along the lines of like, you make me feel really confident in my birth decisions. So I feel like emotional response that was really demonstrating to me that this was like the right way to go.
And the interesting part of the topic, of course, is that there's an emotional part about becoming a mother, right? The
Hmm.
pregnancy, the delivery, and becoming a parent. And I think cord blood is a function, right? It's a moment of time. It's such a crazy thing. I mean, I've decided to do cord blood banking for my two daughters, but it's such a crazy decision to make, right? Because you're not thinking about it, right? You're thinking about
Yeah.
everything else, and then you're saying to yourself, okay, I should have an insurance policy in case something goes wrong years down the road, right? Which is what you saw in your own
Yeah.
family, right? So it's almost like, I don't know, buying an insurance policy, but for something you don't really want to think about, and you have to do that within a very short amount of time, right? So how do you
Right.
think about decompressing or simplifying or kind of like organizing that conversation for folks?
I think it's just about like it's not like we are an external part of the conversation that suddenly parents have to consider. It's like we become the conversation. So we not only talk about baking, but I think that's why I also make content about pregnancy in general. Like I talk about what to expect week, or like this is like what you should bring in your birth bag, that type of thing. So really just establishing trust around like the actual conversation of what folks are doing to prepare for birth. And then they can see cord blood banking as like a part of that. Decision that they have to make on top of every other decision. It's just like a collective sort of is the right way to go, and the right resource side. So yeah, I just try to come forth with a lot of empathy for the birth journey, and parenthood, and really try to make sure all of our sources are evidence based, and truly backed by science, and that we have a lot of folks with a lot of domain authority, and domain experts those views. Um, so yeah, I think it's just about like coming forward with like a true heart as opposed to just sort of like, we're taking your money, you better make a decision which is I think how a lot of people perceive core banking in the past.
What are the common, I think, issues that parents are thinking about, right? Because you mentioned, like, for example, packing for the delivery bag versus, should I choose to bank, right? Stem cells. So, how do you think about that journey from your perspective?
Yeah. So do you mean like the parent decisions?
Yeah, from your perspective, yeah.
So I think, I mean, it kind of depends. Like I've seen parents that sort of don't really feel any decisions or have an opinion on their birth until like eight or like basically right before their birth happens. So like 8 months. I've talked to parents who are like, oh, maybe I should like start thinking about this. But then I have also met parents who are like just find out that they're pregnant and then they're like immediately beginning to plan. So I think it really just depends on your personality. But I think like one that I've seen that's true across the whole ecosystem of companies is that there's just a lot of noise and not a lot of signal. There's like trillions and trillions of pregnancy. It's hard to tell like which resources are factual, which are like really backed by science and things like that. So even things like placenta encapsulation, like eating your placenta become sort of a common pop cultural like artifact in history, but in reality there's not like a ton of science that actually backs the process of doing it, and in fact has resulted in some harm um and children. So but it's hard to determine that like signal behind what people are discussing. So I think it's just that signal and really making sure that parents feel like they can trust their resources and that it aligns with their own personal values. So it's just about the parents feeling confident.
And what's interesting, and I've always appreciated about this, is that, on TikTok, you're Kathryn the person, right? And you explain all of this. And then when I'm talking and collaborating with you, you're so science and fact driven, right? And I think there's this interesting bridge, right, between these two,
Yeah.
uh, I wouldn't say modes, right? Or modalities of communication, right? So how do you think about that? How do you bridge that? How do you translate, for example, what the signals to, like you said, what really resonates on TikTok, which is about the emotionality,
Mhm.
and what it evokes in people.
Yeah. Well, I try to do a lot of like just signaling my sources to make sure that folks know that it's legitimate information. And I just tell the truth and do my best with revealing where my information is coming from. So very often I'll like green screen PubMed articles or things like that, that and peer reviewed studies and research papers that are able to just demonstrate like where my information is coming from. Because I there's a lot of people on TikTok who are just kind of like talking about random things, and sometimes it's even people pursue it the truth. So yeah, I think it's just about like sourcing, and then it is so like having really credible sources and just like a random blog.
And as you do that, what does it take to add that final step, right? Of that, like you said, emotion or emotionality? Because I think what you're saying is, you're choosing, in this space to be more signal oriented. But how do you
Yeah.
make the science be relevant for somebody? That's the other direction.
Yeah, I mean, I just try to understand it myself and think about it from their point of view and really empathize with what pregnant parents would care about. And then in the first like few seconds of the content, I try to illustrate why it would be relevant for them. So even things like if you're pregnant and you have an anterior placenta, um, and I think that like immediately speaks to people of like your placenta and like I have experienced like my baby kicking in this way rather than like how people typically describe it. So they tend to tune into that, feel a little bit more attached to it in a sense and just seen. So I think just like people being like feeling as though folks see them, I think is really important. So that's sort of like an emotional aspect that I bring in, and then from there bring the like facts and science behind they would want to know about.
what does this creation process look like for you? Do you sit down and write it out? Is this something that you're out, I don't know, walking and then you just bumps into your phone and then you just kind of like write it on a notes app? Like, how does that process of all you just discussed, how does that work for you? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I look through like trending content in general under like the pregnancy niche. And a lot of my algorithms have now been geared towards that. So I feel like if I open any social media app, I tend to just see like ads and like suggested content that's in my niche anyway. I get a sense of what people are talking about. Also look at my creation to get a sense of like what it is that my viewers care about and what they talk about. So that's where I draw inspiration from. But other than that, I honestly don't do too much planning for my content because I feel like I'm a more effective public speaker when it's off the cuff. So when it's too rehearsed too much and there's like this like written effort that has to be done. So I try to just speak off the cuff and then afterwards just watch it from like trying to put on the eyes on that I'm trying to reach with this content. So yeah, then from there it's just about editing and making sure that it's really going to capture the relevant target audience. Things like I mentioned, the like if you're pregnant and have like this kind of placenta, then I'll make that a part of the edit. And then adding subtitles and other things that just make it as a form of consumable content.
And what's interesting is that you've done this and you're also doing this primarily on TikTok. And, I also noticed that you're starting to do other, verticals, right? Other
Hmm.
channels as well, social
Yeah.
networks. So how do you see the different channels? Do you feel like, I don't know, TikTok is the future? That's it, ride or die? Or, how do you see that playing out?
Yeah. I mean, we'll see if TikTok of debate on Capitol Hill about its existence in the US. So we'll see. But I definitely think the future is in short form video. As I think TikTok has really proven that as next form of consumable content. I think secondarily, for sure, will continue, but people are looking for more authentic content, which is why Be Real have been really successful. Um, and YouTube, I think, has the best engagement. So although I think short form videos will be the most popular in the future, it's still always going to hold true that if you can capture the audience's attention for a long form video, then you can capture their attention for anything because there's so much attention economy that if you can with a long form piece, then you know that you have this audience like so I think if someone can dominate YouTube, then you've pretty much mastered it all. But there's for sure an increase in short form consumption.
So, these are all your learnings as a founder, right? And as a creator. And what's been interesting is to see you kind of like go through the steps, right? And I think the early stages when we had a conversation, which was the market to building product market fit to monetizing to actually fundraising, right? So, what would you say have been the lessons that you've had as you kind of like evolve from, as you said, an aspiring founder testing the market with content to, being a founder and, the evolution personally?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I've learned more than I have in any other period of my life. Like funding is definitely one aspect of it. So I think how to run like a proper fundraising process. I've been trying to read a lot. So books like Fundraising by Ryan, I think was really helpful for my fundraising process. And then even just like how to run an effective team and build an effective culture that makes folks on the team feel welcome. So I've been reading books like High Growth Handbook and Traction to really solidify. And then I think with marketing in particular and content creation, because it's new, there's actually not that many really helpful resources in existence. So it's just a matter of like doing it and being able to um, cultivate your own learnings. So yeah, I think the fact that I've just been many years, even prior to my business, like I've always been really interested in social media and posting content. Like I was like a Twitch streamer for a month and stuff like that. So I've done a bunch of different experiments that I feel like has helped me more deeply understand the different segments of people that are at different platforms.
So you mentioned that this has been the greatest time of personal learning. So what about it makes it a time of accelerated learning for you versus, you know, you went to Wellesley, which is obviously a great place of learning as well, or at least they
Yeah.
try to be, and obviously, you've worked as well. So like what makes this period, I think, a accelerated curve for you?
I think it's that there's so much responsibility involved. Like when you're a founder, it's not just like not only your company's fiduciary responsibility to your investors, as well as like just a personal and fiduciary responsibility to your teammates and just like your well-being in general. I feel like a lot of founders end up tying their mental health to their business's well-being as well because it just becomes like a part of your identity. You have like a personal duty to yourself to really make the business continue. So yeah, because there's so much responsibility and this are so high for founders. I think like every action that I've done and at least like cultivate some sort of learning from it versus like at Wellesley, it's just sort of like you have like tuition and that's kind of the main incentive in a sense to like really learn. But other than that, there's a lot of like socializing and distractions, and you can like justify it by like, well, this is what people do in college anyways. But when it's a business, it's like it's really you pushing forward the whole ship. So yeah, I think because of the weight, just really take everything very, very seriously and try to soak up as much information as I can.
As you think about the acceleration, what has helped you stay on top of it, right? So you mentioned reading books has been
Mhm.
one way that you accelerate that learning curve. The other one is taking on more ownership and accountability. What other, reflections have you had about how you've accelerated that learning curve?
Yeah, I think just sort of turning yourself as well as your business into like an operating an OS for it. So like even for myself, more most recently, I've started having like a personal notion in the same way that my business has like a hub notion and we have all these like sub notions. And so I've been starting to do the same thing for myself of like things I learn in business, things that like spark joy for me, like books that I've read that I've liked, quotes that have inspired me, and create like a second brain in a sense. There's a book called The Second Brain that I actually haven't read, but read articles about the concept of it. And so I think this, yeah, idea of creating a second brain and creating an OS for yourself is something else that can really help with that and is something that I think most founders I know come to a point where they do the same.
As you think about that, what advice have you gotten over the past few years that you felt has particularly resonated with you? You mentioned about talking to other founders and hearing about the second brain. Any advice that has stood out for you?
Um, it's like the Facebook value of like move fast, break things. I've heard like variations of the same ethos. And I think that that always really resonates with me because I person that really like a lot of information before making a decision and consult with experts in the field and things like that. But I and learning that as a founder, like sometimes you just really have to take on the decision yourself and move forward with it, even if it's as little as like, how do we go about like editing this like piece of content? Like, should we do it this way or this way? But it's sort of like you just need to make a decision and move forward, and in the future you can modify it. Yeah, just moving fast and being okay with breaking things.
And as you think through that, what has been the positives you've seen from moving fast and breaking things from your personal perspective versus, I think, times that he hasn't worked out? Sounds like you've decided on more on moving fast and breaking things, but I'm just kind of curious about your reflections about integrating that mindset.
Yeah, I mean, I regrets, I guess, like the for with the mindset because I think it's like if you fail, you still learn from it. So yeah, And yeah, upon reflection, like the mindset is something that should be employed across all startups because I've also met like quite a few founders who just get like stuck on an idea. They don't know how to execute. They're like researching for months. And then nothing really happens just because they were like scared of the decision or like didn't feel confident in their own decision. But yeah, you just like you won't move forward. So you may as well die trying.
Die trying. Okay. Why? What? Tell me more about that. Why die trying? Yeah.
um, I don't know. I'm just like I feel like I experience things rather than not. So yeah, I've always tried to like I really, really love like TV and movies and things like that. I've always strived to live a life that makes me feel like my own life would be than watching TV. So I usually use like how much to watch as like a KPI for like how enriching my own life is. And so yeah, you always want to live a life that is more scintillating than any TV show you could find. So you may as well try everything that you can, even if it means that you'll fail. And it's better than being stagnant and watching other people's lives.
So you measure how much you're, kind of like going through life by how much TV you consume, and you're also creating content across TikTok and YouTube, right? Which is our generation's, television,
Mhm.
right? Yeah. I always do remember personally that I was like, oh, I'm pretty proud I don't watch that much TV. And then I was like to myself, wait. And I looked at my YouTube, my Netflix, and all of that. And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
wait, I am watching maybe just as much TV, right? So how do you feel about that? I mean, obviously, there's always that push to like produce, right? And also to
Mhm.
consume, right? So how do you feel about that, dichotomy or that trade-off between those two sides personally?
I think yeah, I mean, I would say you should definitely try producing content, I guess, if you're looking to do like one or the other. Because like I said, like it's worth watching, not watching others, is the way. But also, like I have never shied away from the camera and just find social media like really interesting. And even things like when I was in high school, I used to model. I just always enjoyed being like center stage. So yeah, in that way content just kind of comes naturally to me. But yeah, but I think like consumption of social media to me feels like a different form of consumption versus like TV and movie. You're watching like really, really organic content for the most part that is like usually one person's vision or one person's take and mindset on the world. So I think TikTok has actually opened up like a lot of empathy memes, and I think memes make people feel closer to one another because there's so many experiences that everyone thinks is so unique to them. But like a few days ago I saw a tweet that was like, I've never had an original thought, and it's a tweet that or like a TikTok or anything that has a thought that you thought was original, but in reality there are really no original thoughts. um yeah.
Wow, I love that point about there being no original thoughts left in the world.
Yeah,
um,
which I don't bad thing. I think it's a beautiful thing because that's why people assemble in communities when they have the same thoughts.
I want to double click on that, right? So, as you said, the beautiful thing is that you get to join a community where everyone has the same thoughts, right? And I think
Yeah,
that's a good example, right? I think Reddit isn't great, but subreddit, is where the magic happens, right? Where everybody's looking at,
yeah,
stopping drinking, or everybody's looking at personal motivation, right? So these
yeah.
subreddits are very, well, I want to say niche, but I think it's hard to find, right?
Hmm.
So what are your reflections around building community where everyone is, thinking or aspiring the same?
I mean, I think it's yeah, like a really great thing to be a part of. I've always loved like the idea of being a part of communities and building communities because it's what sort of like the core of society is built on. So like human nature is to like want to know about other people's lives own. And that is best with your community. So I think, yeah, it's really just, it comes down to like exhibiting empathy for others' experiences and also being vulnerable enough to be able to share your own so that others can empathize with you. So that's sort of my general philosophy on community building is just the foundation has to be empathy.
Y- I think empathy is the tricky part, right, in today's world, right? Because you know it feels one-sided, right? I mean, obviously, when I'm consuming TikTok or YouTube or Instagram, obviously, I feel that empathy that's being channeled on me. But from a production basis, as a creator, sometimes you're just facing a camera, right? A mirror, right? So, it feels like, consuming it, it does feel like there's that empathy, but when you're producing it, there's a bit of otherness, right? How do you deal with that, I think? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Whenever I'm filming content is like, oh, I'm looking at a camera, I always think of it as like I am looking at a camera for this to be edited, for this to be seen by pregnant parents whose lives I hope to impact. And so like, yeah, so to me, there's still like a huge empathy. In fact, maybe more so because like there's something special about like the promise of a lot of reach, which on is usually like undeniable because of the way that the algorithm is built. So yeah, it's different than having like a one-on-one conversation. Like making content is a place that yeah, it'll definitely be able to be amplified, and because of that, it's almost more likely that you'll find people that resonate with your content versus the one-on-one conversation. So I think that's why like vlogs and like the nature of just like get ready with me videos and stuff like that has popular because they're able to find other people that are having the same unoriginal thoughts as they are, and able, um, yeah, just like create community around
You made me laugh at the word vlogs because
that.
video logs are it's like it came out, it was super hot 10 years ago, it disappeared, it's
Mm,
coming back, right? So what do you
yeah,
think, what do you think is the appeal of vlogs, and for those who don't, is video logs, right? Journals, right? Like, why do you
yeah.
think it went away? Why do you think it came back? Yeah.
I time when it wasn't popular. Because I was even watching like I didn't consume that much YouTube until I was like 21, but yeah, but I feel like a lot of my friends did. So like since we were like 13, Timberland vlogs or yeah, whoever was getting really popular or makeup videos are really popular. So yeah, but I think that they've become really popular because people crave that social interaction and it's probably like the least intensive personal consumption that you can do to still feel social interaction. Vlogs, it's sort of like the same feeling that you get from FaceTiming a friend, but you don't have to have the energy to like reciprocate the interaction. Thing that I learned when I was like streaming on Twitch for like a month. I made it like a goal to stream for at least an hour every day for a month just to test out the platform. This was prior to me being a founder, but I think that that was really insightful because Twitch is really like very much so different than any other social media platform versus like TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, like still but to me like Twitch felt very different and I think it's because there are way more people viewing than creating, versus like on Instagram like people will post like almost everyone will like post one photo in their life, but everyone will Twitch stream, but a lot of people will view Twitch streams. So yeah, I got like quite a few viewers who would comment like pretty regularly on my Twitch streams, and I me and like we can co-stream or whatever, and a lot of people would say no. So that's when I realized that they were like they liked the social, want the same like sense of exertion and yeah, sociability that's required with like also producing content and engaging in a real conversation.
Eh, That's an interesting, I don't know, theory or construct that you're putting there, right? Which is that,
Yeah.
there's differing levels of social interaction that people want to have, right? In terms of
Ye-
effort, versus on your end or the creator's end, it's about, that. point of view, right? So how do you
Mhm.
feel about that? Is that the trends? I guess society is moving towards that direction.
I think people are just becoming more and more honest about social anxiety. Like I see a lot of memes about social anxiety, and I think um, definitely like as we move to like an world, people can be more open about the fact that they have major social anxiety. And they can receive like the need to socialize, like the human need to can be fulfilled through social media. I think that's why people even could survive like the lockdowns during the pandemic, because we have FaceTime and YouTube, and you can consume other people's content. Yeah, you can just be honest about the fact that you have social anxiety and not have to front it and get over it.
And on that note, the interesting part is that the world is increasingly trending towards it, right? And I think you're right. I think that you know 100 years ago, you know, you either turned up for the tea party or you didn't turn up for the tea party, right? You went up for lunch or you
Yeah.
didn't have lunch, right? There's no way to like. I guess you could be there was a few opportunities to be part of a gallery and you're watching the musicians play on stage and they're producing and you're kind of watching, right? But now,
Mhm.
it's everywhere, right? I can go for a walk. I'm
Yeah.
engaged in terms of consumption and interacting by pressing a like button or
Mhm.
heart button. But on the other side is a different conversation. So there's a differential of that piece. So I guess the world's gonna trend more towards it. Feels like, a lot of folks don't like that future, right? They say like it's bad or evil, or people don't know how to get out anymore, or kids don't know how to socialize. What do you say
Mm.
to that? Yeah.
I think it's I don't know, like, not something that can even be. I think it's just due to the fact that like the world is so dynamic. Like back when people didn't have social anxiety, they also didn't have much to be about, because there was just like not a lot of stimulation like 200 years ago, for instance, versus now. Like my nana would always tell me like Pride and Prejudice is so long and boring, because that's all they could do during that time was like sit around and talk about marriage. Like now, like I think it's, I forget the exact number, but I think it's like every human consumes equivalent to 74 newspapers worth of information every day. And that's sort of like the foundation of the like theories behind this idea of a second brain, and creating a second brain is like, how do you take all the information you're receiving, process it in an efficient way, and be able to recall it later on when you need to. So that's why I started writing down like my favorite quotes and books and things like that, to really build upon this idea of a second brain. So yeah, but because we have so much stimulation, like there's we can take. So I think an increase in social anxiety is natural, and can't really be stopped as like tech society advances. So yeah, you just have to choose what you want to be stimulated by. And I think it's kind of interesting because people have like been like, there's almost like a Gen Z trend to take on less stimulation. Like I've seen quite a few TikToks of people buying flip phones and like throwing away their iPhone. So even things like that. So I think as stimulation grows, social anxiety could grow, but likewise, like a decrease in stimulation will probably also grow.
Awesome. And I'd love for you to share about a time that you personally have been brave.
um, I feel like I've been like brave my life. I don't know. When I was 12, I wrote like 100-page memoir, because I was like, my life is so tragic. um so yeah, like I think when I was 3 and my brother was 1, my first memory is my brother's near drowning accident. So I feel like although at the time I wasn't like consciously trying to be brave, like I was really trying to just process everything at once. I had a brother that was like perfectly healthy and would like follow me around and like do everything that I did, to the point that like my mom said that when I was younger I would get annoyed, and then suddenly I didn't have that anymore. And I didn't have like a brother who's soccer or things like that like I felt like that like potential experience like throughout my life. And then when he passed away suddenly, it was like a separate grieving experience. So I think yeah, that whole like typical American dream, like nuclear family vision, And using different pieces of that, like my parents getting divorced or what have you, has, yeah, been something that I've had to brace. So I feel like I've always felt like brave, just like navigating that.
I think that personal loss obviously is tough, right? And I think for a lot of folks, as they grieve, I think they process that grief in different ways, right? And so you're right. I think, we kind of laugh a little bit at the memoir, but I think your life was tough, right? And because you're dealing with that emotional processing as well. Um, how, my last question is, for folks who obviously, are driven by, a sense of mission, a sense of loss, a sense of processing, is there any advice they have for folks who are trying to kind of like, make that their purpose? Was there any advice that you would give to them?
Um, I think it depends if you want to channel grief. Like I think some people don't want to continue it. I think for me it felt okay. Um, but yeah, but I honestly never used to talk about my brother's accident because I really don't like the idea of like soliciting pity or people feeling bad for me. So it wasn't until I started this business that I like really started publicly talking about it. Like a lot of my friends like wouldn't find out that I had a sibling until I had known them for like a year. Um, so yeah, I think it just depends on like with like any grief that they experience. Um, I mean, I really encourage everyone to be a founder. So I think like a business is like the best thing you can build in honor of someone. And yeah, to me, it's like the most efficient way to create income. So you can honor someone through that.
Great. On that note, I'd love to kind of like, summarize the three big themes I got from this conversation. The first is thank you so much for sharing about your journey from, someone who grew up in that family and your own personal experience of grief to how you process that. And more importantly, chose to, I think, channel that to become a founder and to do something about a problem. And in the process of that became what you're more publicly known as like a TikTok star. But it's just nice to see that, juxtaposition, right? And also the sequence of which one is really came first and which one is actually
Yeah.
more primary to your personal identity, right? So I thought that was a really interesting arc and journey, as well as to where you are today. Second, I love this part about learning curves, especially for this last chunk of time, from product market fit to fundraising. And I think a lot of your learnings about community, about original thoughts, and how everybody's kind of learning from each other in terms of differential social interactions and finding each other, and there being the consumption now of 74 newspapers of information every day versus having to sit and discuss Pride and Prejudice because it's the only book that's available. And lastly, I really appreciate, I think, the phrase that you said, right, which is about, just die trying, right? I really appreciate
Yeah.
that, I think, spirit that you have about just going for it and just pushing forward every day. So thank you so much, Kathryn, for coming on the show.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. This is definitely the most meta I've gotten cast, but it was really cool.